Hello, welcome to, I think it's episode 8 of The Outside Fence. I'm your host, Tristan Heffernan. With me, as always, is Stewart Brown. Balls, thanks for joining me again. We got back to headquarters there, Flemington, on the weekend. Any joy for you?
A little bit, but I had a small loss overall, so wasn't too much damage done. But finished on the wrong side of the ledger.
Well, can't win every week.
No, you definitely can't.
The track, though, was a bit of a winner. Played beautifully.
Yeah, it did. They went into the meeting. They obviously had a bit of rain the night before, and the track was officially a soft 7, but probably played on the better side of that. It wasn't sort of noticeably really wet or not. And as far as how it raced, yeah, it was perfect. Pretty much all horses would have got their chance. There was no real discernible bias or not. Maybe towards the very end of the program, they sort of started to get away from that inside fence a bit. But yeah, there was no real issues, and you couldn't really have an excuse for a horse based on how the track played.
Excellent. We're going to look at 3 races tonight. Aurie Star's always been it's always traditionally a bit of a spring kickoff. It's lost its aura a little bit the last few years. Is there many of the horses we saw go around the Aurie Star going to figure later in the spring, do you think?
Probably not right at the pointy end, but they'll be sort of, I suppose, bit players in a few of the sort of lesser feature races through the spring. But it used to be, I think back in the day, Bart Cummings used to start a lot of his Cups horses in the Aurie Star. But obviously in the last few years it's turned into more of a race where I suppose a few horses have been racing through the winter, meet the odd resumer, and it's never too bad a race, but it never reaches sort of great heights.
Yeah, that's what we're going to deal with for the next few weeks, aren't we? The winter horses trying to hold their own against the spring horses kicking off a bit. Let's have a look at the Aurie Star, because you did tip us great again on last week's show, just off the noms, which is always a tricky thing to do, tipping off the noms. But he ran a really good race, great again. But looks like he just found one a bit too good for him on the day here in Home of the Brave.
Yep, so as we go to the replay here, you'll see Great Again was drawn the outside gaze here in the red colours, sort of going pretty much to the front now, and Home of the Brave is in the Godolphin blue on his outside now. He actually copped a bit of a bump from Great Again as they came out of the gates, which didn't help him. I actually had him as the leader in the race and thought sort of when he didn't lead and get a bit of the control, it might have been sort of hard work for him, but as you say, he ended up the winner and in a pretty good performance. But as you see, they've coming down the straight here, they've only gone at sort of a very slow tempo. As you see in a lot of these straight races, they start off very slow and it's a bit of a slow build in tempo up the straight as they get sort of towards the end. But this was pretty much just a sprint home. You've got Yulong January leading in the green colours on the inside there from the aforementioned Great Again, and Home of the Brave on the outside. Another horse to keep an eye out for is Gamekeeper. It's in the orange cap outside Home of the Brave, trained by Tony and Calvin McAvoy. It's a horse at 1200 is well short of its best, and it raced with success through the winter. As you can see here, it finishes off nicely down the outside. It's probably the eye-catching run of the race, but as they got towards the finish there, Home of the Brave was a bit too strong in the finish for Great Again, but both horses sort of has performed well and sort of up to, I suppose, expectations there.
Okay, let's talk of Home of the Brave, because he's always had a bit of quality and raced in these good quality races. His sectionals really point out how slow they sort of did go in those early stages, I think.
Yeah, it did. A lot of the horses that finished up the pointy end of this race have sort of right up the top of the best sort of last 6, 4 and 200 metres sectionals of the day. Home of the Braves ran the 5th fastest last 400 and 3rd fastest last 200 of the meeting, which is a great effort. And Gamekeeper, who I mentioned before, running on, it's run the 4th best last 400 of the meeting and the 3rd best last 200 of the meeting as well, equal with Home of the Brave. So given 1,200 metres isn't his ideal distance, he's certainly one to note out of that race.
Yeah, so you mentioned to me about Gamekeeper and the betting. It was very firm in the market. Do you think that's a good pointer going forward in the preparation as well?
Yeah, it definitely is for it, because going into the race, I was a bit surprised how firm it was in the market, considering its form had been over sort of a mile and 2,000 metres. And I thought even the quality of races that it had won were sort of well short of this. So to see it so firm in the market and run so well obviously shows that the horse is going very well, and it possibly might have improved it had a short break into this from its winter campaign. It had 77 days off, so it's possibly the horse obviously carrying a bit of residual fitness as well, but he might have improved a little bit in that break as well.
Okay, there's another horse that was very firm in the market, Widgie Turf. What did you make of his run?
Yeah, he was quite firm in the market. He was having his first run down the straight, and he was on his preferred wet ground. Now, Widgie Turf, he was a bit of a query horse for me going into the race because I didn't love his last preparation. Throughout his career, he's been an unbelievably consistent horse, and he's always had a great winning strike rate. However, last preparation, he did run in some good top quality races, but he also ran in some sort of lower class races and failed to win, which was a bit of a warning sign for me. So I wanted to have a look at him on Saturday, and even though he sort of was first go down the straight, he did settle back off a slow tempo. His sectionals still weren't great, so I'm sort of want to see him again, and I'm a bit cautious about. I'd be a bit cautious jumping into Widgie Turf until I see him sort of perform again.
Those who know you, Balls, you've been famous for a list back in the day of horses that will never win another race. Is Widgie Turf getting that way?
He possibly could be heading that way. I wouldn't want to put him on it yet because I've got too much respect for the trainer, Patrick Payne, who's a bit of a genius. But, certainly the jury is out on Widgie Turf at the moment as a horse at that sort of group, even at that sort of group and listed level.
Okay. Looking forward, I guess, Home of the Brave, great again, similar type of races. Are they both just wet trackers?
That's definitely their preferred surface. They're not completely hopeless on a dry track, but yeah, if you want to back either of them, you'd be looking for a wet track. As far as what they go to next, I'm not quite sure. They'll probably want to keep Home of the Brave to straight racing because that's where he's sort of performed at his best. And Great Again has been up through the winter, so I'm not sure whether he might go for a break now or they might try and squeeze the lemon one more time.
Okay, so similar races if we can find them for those two. Gamekeeper's obviously one we're going to keep an eye on going forward. And anything else out of that race maybe we can look for next time?
Oh, well, the leader in the race was Yulong January, who had a very successful summer campaign earlier in the year. Now, he's a far better horse at 1,400, rolling along in front, sort of doing his own thing. So he went okay, but he's sort of probably one to keep an eye out for once he gets to 1,400, and particularly if he finds a race where he can get his own way in front. He can be a hard horse to run down.
Okay, excellent. Might be able to find him in a Caulfield 1,400, which really suits the leaders. Beautiful. We're going to go on now to the Seppelt Wines Trophy. This is a horse that we've noticed a couple of times on the show in the past few weeks, Tavidance, and it's fair to say we saw the real Tavidance here, Balls.
Yeah, we certainly did. That's him who drew the inside gate there in the Mick Price colours, the blue and white, settling sort of third the fence. So this race here was over the 1,700 or 1,720, and they've gone along at a genuine tempo, courtesy of He Excels and also the name escapes me of the horse who led, but we'll get back to that. But yeah, Tavidance settled third the fence there. The other horses to keep an eye out for in this race are probably Naivasha, who is in sort of the greeny sort of colours, a bit worse in midfield on the fence, and also Winning Partner, who is settling last at the moment, and as you'll see makes a run down the outside. But as I said, they went at a genuine tempo here, and that suited Tavidance as he's able to settle close to the speed, and that barrier one maybe looked a bit awkward that he might get sort of boxed up, but the genuine tempo allowed the field to spread out. So he's in clear air there with a great run behind the leaders. Reserve Street was the horse that I was thinking of that was leading there. And there's a sitting shot for Tavidance, who is, as they come to the turn, he is travelling excellent. As I said, the main danger is the back in the field there. Naivasha is sort of saving runs on the inside, looks to be travelling well there. And is possibly some chance of getting onto the back of Tavidance here. But as you can see in the straight here, Tavidance quickly reins in those leaders, and he bolts away from them, and it's a most dominant win for the horse, who the jury was out a little bit after his last run at Caulfield, but as we pointed out, you could make excuses for it. There's certainly no excuses today. He sort of got onto his preferred, or at this stage, his preferred soft surface, and as you can see, he's bolted in there. Winning Partner's come down the outside and grabbed second from the Naivasha there.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, episode 6, we talked about the run of Tavidance last time, and you identified the wide gates. He did a bit wrong. He had to race back in the field. There were many excuses for him, which you'd put us on, and then whatever queries were there over gate 1, they were gone in about 200 metres there. He just lobbed into the perfect spot, and we saw what he really could do. I think that's a really good example of when to give the horse another chance. So you've nailed that one. Well done there, Balls. Naivasha is it's definitely a horse that's on my radar. Basically, I'm a big fan of Danny O'Brien's stable. Where can we look for this horse to get to this spring, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where it'll go. It's a mare, so it's obviously eligible for mares races as well. I assume like most mares, maybe like the Mire might be or the Empire Rose, I think it's called now, might be an end target, but that would be sort of a really big shot at the stumps, as the horse sort of hasn't shown that yet. But on Saturday, it was sort of first up, 84 days between runs at that sort of distance, which isn't uncommon for Danny O'Brien. He's got a nice property down near Barwon Heads, I think, and sort of can get them nice and fit and run them off long breaks. But as I said, the horse sort of had every chance railing up and then getting out towards the middle of the track there. But he sort of run well enough. Like if you look at the races, take Tavidance out of it and put the others, and that's the race, then she's run quite well there. And if she can find, say, a similar race without a horse like Tavidance in it, she's obviously going to be very competitive in that, or even back to mare's grade around that sort of mile to 2,000 metre range.
Okay, one more on Tavidance. Wet tracker?
That's the big query with it at the moment, because its failure at Caulfield, or perceived failure, was on good ground, whereas I suppose its best performances have been with at least the sting out of the ground. So I'd like to see it, say, on dry ground next time. Then we're going to get a really good idea of sort of what this horse is. We'll be able to pretty much build its profile straight from there. If it failed again on dry ground, you'd probably say, well, I'm only going to look for it again on wet ground. Obviously, if it runs well on that dry ground again, then you can probably be pretty confident that this is a really good horse and sort of it can handle any conditions.
Yeah, beautiful. There's one for Joe last week talking about profiling his horses. Inconclusive last time, so we'll give him another chance on dry ground, but that was most impressive, Tavidance.
Yeah.
Another horse that we mentioned 2 weeks ago on the show was a horse called Skyman, which is an import for the Chris Wally yard. Had very few friends first up, and although it had seemingly the best run in the race, it was still most impressive the way it won. Now, he raced in race 7 here at Flemington and scored another win. We're going to look at this race as well. Didn't have everything go his own way this time, Balls.
No, he didn't. So this race was over 2,000 metres. You'll see Skyman's in the sort of blue and white colours. It's about midfield at the moment. Now, there's a period at this early part of the race where Skyman sort of looks like getting into a nice midfield position. As if you keep an eye on the horse in front of him, Miraku, who's in like the blue and with the white spots on his hat, Luke Noel on it is hell-bent on getting the horse to settle or restraining it. And he sort of keeps dragging it back right into the face of Skyman there, which obviously does Skyman no favours. As you can see, Miraku's sort of pulling a bit and racing a bit ungenerously there. And Skyman's sort of copying the backwash of that. And he ends up sort of back near the tail of the field, sort of third last. And they're only going at a slow tempo here with the old boy Lord Durante leading them up. With pretty much with one of the other favourites, Cadre du Noir, sitting outside it.
What was that one?
Excuse my French, yeah. And as I mentioned, they're only going at a slow tempo here. So Skyman's he's got his work cut out from there. With one of the other favourites outside the leader, and then the other favourite was De Niro in the yellow colours, which has the back of Skyman, who's settling last. But so as they come up towards, say, the 800 metre mark here, the tempo hasn't really lifted at all. A couple of horses, now they start to sort of make their move a bit. The Skyman's still a long way back, and as I mentioned, they have only gone slowly. And he has to make that sort of wide run around the field. Whereas, say, a horse like Kentucky Tornado in those green colours is sort of sucking up on the fence there, saving a bit of ground. But as you can see with Skyman here, it's travelling extra well when it sort of cruises up to them. And at this stage, if you were on it, you'd be feeling pretty comfortable with yourself as He's sort of got the leaders in his sight. Now, at this stage, you'd think he's probably going to race away and maybe win by a length or two. Cadre du Noir has he's raced outside the leader, but he really fights on here and sort of makes Skyman work for this win. But it's still, in my view, that's a very good win by Skyman, considering how the race was run, what happened to him earlier in the race, and then sort of how he circled the field there. And he still won sort of a little bit cosily, like he always had it in hand. So I definitely think there's better things in store for Skyman now.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit up the sleeve there for Skyman. He was pretty kind on him once the job was done. I think the pace didn't seem to quite go on the bend as much as what it could have, and that might have made his task a little bit more difficult if he had to come wide and chase when they were really going, but there was still a few of them being held together, so I still no knock, but yeah, they did let him get into the race a bit easier than
he was able to creep into it not too badly. But the thing with him, he has, like, considering this is obviously a pretty decent Saturday meeting, and there's obviously sprint races on the card, and generally you don't find decent sectionals of the day in 2,000 metre races. He's run the 16th best 600 of the 400, the 18th best 4 to the 2, and the 20th best last 200 of the meeting. So he sort of consistently got home well there, and it sort of shows that he can make that sort of, I suppose, long 600 metre run, even off a slow tempo, and still perform well.
Yeah, they're pretty good when you consider there's about 7 or 8 horses in the Aurie Star sprinting home off no tempo that's in that top 20. Yeah. So
it's another race on the card over 1,000 metres as well. So that obviously you generally get the best sectionals of the day out of those sort of races.
All right, beautiful. Well, there's still a bit to come for Skyman then. Cadre du Noir, can you tell me a bit more about it? Because the way it fought on, I was really impressed with that. We saw a horse, a 2-year-old fought on the show a few weeks ago, Alcyone, and he came out and won at his next start. That really caught my eye, the way he fought on. Cadre du Noir.
Yeah, well, it's only his second run in Australia after coming from Europe. He's with Kieran Barr and Dave Eustace, so he's obviously in good hands. And he did have every chance sort of sitting up there on the speed on a slow tempo, but as you say, he's fought on very well there and made that winner really work for his win. So he's definitely a horse that if he stays around that 2,000 metre distance, a win's not far away in a similar sort of race. Like, he's going to be very hard to beat.
Okay, another horse you mentioned there sneaking up on the inside in the green around the bend was Kentucky Tornado. She finished off really nicely.
Yeah, she did. That was only a second run back, and she's run the 9th fastest last 200 of the meeting. She did similar first up over a mile at Sandown as well. So her best form is over 2,400 historically. So she might have come back, and I'm tipping she's come back a lot better horse this preparation. And she's more been, say, a midweek horse, but she can probably measure up to this sort of Saturday grade now, and she's definitely a horse. If she, even 2,000 again next start, or if she rises to 2,400 in a similar sort of class, she definitely can be winning a race in the next month or so.
Okay, beautiful. Put that one on in the black book, Kentucky Tornado. The other one to talk about in this race, I think, is the horse you mentioned that settled last. That was very firm in the market, De Niro. What did you make of his run?
Yeah, he's probably only gone fair. He obviously wasn't suited by the slow tempo, but he did have the winners back, and the winners sort of finished well ahead of him. He was a horse that was very unlucky in the race that Skyman won at Caulfield last start. He was sort of stuck over on the fence and didn't really get a crack at them. This was his first go, not his first go at 2,000, but first go for the prep at 2,000. And yeah, as I said, he was only fair. I wouldn't totally sack him off that run, but you'd probably want him in a race with a more genuine tempo. The trainer was interviewed before the race and did mention he spoke quite negatively about the tactics they were going to use on the horse, because it was drawn wide. He was happy to snag out the back. So I suppose from that, I'd almost take it, if you can find the horse again is in and it draws well, maybe that might force them to be a bit more positive, and they might try and sort of at least get the horse into a midfield position, and then it's probably going to find like a race it can possibly win. Okay,
excellent. Keep an eye on the gate next time for De Niro. Thank you, Balls. 3 quality winners there at Flemington on Saturday. We've got a few questions now to go through. Thanks to everyone who sent these in. Another impressive winner was Octane from, is it Philip Stokes over there in South Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a question in from Nicholas. Thank you. How do you line up the interstate form? For example, Octane came from South Australia and won at Flemington. What are some considerations to try and line up the form? I'll throw this one straight to you to start, Balls.
Yep. So, for instance, I used obviously Octane as example when I was looking at that race prior to the meeting. It was obviously a horse of high interest. It had been quite impressive in its wins in South Australia. Now, a few things that I would use, there are a lot of horses from Victoria that go to South Australia and race, so you can generally, if it's racing against them, that can give you some guide sort of on what level they're at. Obviously, if they're running a good time over there, good sectionals, things like that, that can sort of give you an idea of the quality of the horse. And then I suppose a lot of the time South Australian horses will come to Victoria. They don't generally bring ones over that aren't in good form. So they generally have a good record when they bring them over. So you've always got to be, I suppose, extra cautious with it, and particularly stables like Philip Stokes. He's got a stable over here, so he's going to know what horses are obviously that he trains in Victoria are up to sort of city grade and how they measure up against his South Australian horses as well. But yeah, stable like Philip Stokes or Gordon Richards, whenever they bring horses to Victoria, I'm always very wary of them.
I'm glad you threw in a Gordon Richards reference there. I thought that would be coming. He's had an unbelievable record the last 12 months when he's brought horses to Melbourne. So that's good. Keep an eye on the stables. That's a good lead. Personally, when I'm trying to line up some form that I don't realise, is I like to think of the other horses in the race and maybe think about what I'd expect them to do in the races that the other horse is coming from. So with Octane coming from South Australia, I'd look at a few of the other horses in that Flemington race and think, what would I expect from them in those similar races over in South Australia? How would they perform? Maybe what price they'd be in the betting, that type of thing. And that's a way that I would try and line them up as well. But yeah, it definitely comes with experience, that type of thing, and knowing your stables and that kind of thing. Thanks for your question there, Nicholas. We've got Joe back on board with a couple of short, sharp ones here, Balls. Joe was a big DK Weir fan, I'm sure. He said now he's on the outer. Which trainer is the most reliable to follow into spring when it comes to getting their horses cherry ripe for the grand final?
Yeah, well, for this, I suppose most of the bigger stables, you can have some level of confidence that they're going to be right, particularly if they will say in the media, I'm setting this horse for a certain race, that sort of thing. You can be fairly confident. But a stable that I particularly like as a grand final trainer is Anthony Friedman. I think he does a great job with, well, his team seems to be growing all the time, but generally he's a bit of a limited numbers. But if you know he's got a horse that he's setting for a race, you can bet with confidence because you know the horse will be sort of spot on the day and sort of cherry ripe for that. You can also use this in your advantage as well for lead up races as well. If you're aware of stables that are particularly grand final trainers, you can, and the horse that you know is having a bit of a lead up run, then you can obviously use that to your advantage and make sure that you could possibly bet around it, or just be aware that they're probably not sort of 100% balls to the wall today.
Yeah, very good. So the run before the grand final, is that usually where we can almost see a flat run? I know the Snowdens have been almost notorious for having just a slightly flatter run heading into the major race. Is that something we should keep an eye on? Yeah,
definitely. And it's, I suppose, if you know that horse is the grand final coming for the horse and they put in a perceived poor one before that, be careful, obviously sacking the horse. I think there was a few years in a row there with the Golden Slipper, I think, where the winner was, or the favourite for the Slipper, sort of 2 runs out, would put in a perceived poor run the start prior and drift out a bit, and then it'd end up winning the Slipper, and everyone would be like, geez, that was pretty obvious, and it's paid $6 or $8 or something like that. So yeah, it's something you've definitely got to be careful of, the flat run prior to the grand final, because generally after that flat run, the good stables can get the horses to spike again.
Yeah, one that comes to mind with Anthony Friedman was Warning last year before the Derby, actually, which wasn't necessarily a flat run, but wasn't the the flashing light that
Well, it just
people are
didn't
looking
find
for.
it just wasn't a suitable race at all. And also the big thing as well, the blinkers going on in the grand final, and I think D. Oliver going on as well was, a couple of very easy factors to take into consideration when deciding to back the horse.
Beautiful, beautiful. I've got one more for you now from Joe. Now he's got his trainer sorted. Can you give us an apprentice to follow in Victoria that has a nice claim we can take advantage of in the spring?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I suppose particularly with the major races through the spring, obviously a lot of apprentices aren't going to get rides in them, and then obviously the non-claiming races. But I suppose around the edges of the spring, you can pick up the couple of, I suppose, new kids on the block in Victoria at the moment who are getting a fair bit of press: Campbell Rawiller and Will Price. Both come from pretty good stock, with both their fathers being very successful jockeys over their career. Both very good jockey. Campbell's particularly good in front, very vigorous rider as you'd expect being a Rawiller. But yeah, he's very easy to back in front. I slightly favour Will Price as sort of that all-round rider, but no issues with any of them. There's another one that he rode it, say, a few years ago and seemed to have a break, but now he's back again. Lewis German, compared to how he was riding sort of a few years ago, now how he's riding now, he's a massive improver in the jockey ranks, I reckon, and I'm very happy to back him if he's on one that I like as well. So yeah, Lewis German's not too bad as well. But there are plenty. Thomas Stockdale's another decent apprentice in Victoria as well that you're sort of never frightened of backing. But those four are probably the main ones.
Yeah, they've got such a great setup these days, racing Victoria. These apprentices, they're ready to go. The nice point you make there about Lewis German, actually, you got to remember these are young, improving riders, and yeah, it's folly sometimes to write these guys off early in their careers because, like anyone, they can improve sharply once things start to click. So, thank you, Balls. There you go, Joe. A few for you to follow through the spring. It's going to take us into takeaway of the week. Who's going to kick off this week, Balls? You or me?
I'll go.
Beauty.
I'll stick with, since we race at Flemington on Saturday, I'll stick with I suppose a Flemington theme and talk about straight races. Now, particularly with straight races, I think you need to just take into account straight form. I'd almost take, if possible, sort of throw out as much as you can the rest of its form, sort of around the corners, around bends and things like that. And purely, if you narrow it down and look at the horse's straight form, I think that helps you a long way to finding the winner. So as the straight, I suppose, is very much a specialist setup. There's the Flemington Straight. There's sort of not many. There's nothing really like it throughout Australia. Looking at the Aurie Star from Saturday, if you purely just looked at all the horses and decided, okay, who are the horses here with the best straight form, it was very easy to find Great Again and Home of the Brave, who obviously finished first and second. Great Again had 2 runs down the straight for a win and a second in sort of similar class races, whereas Home of the Brave had a career in the UK prior where he's a very successful straight horse. And then his 2 runs at Flemington down the straight had been, whilst he hadn't won, he'd run sort of good placings in both of them. And also, it was of particular note as well, his trainer, James Cummings, was quite outspoken during the week about how much this horse sort of loves the straight. And I think he even said Home of the Brave was his best straight horse. So I'm not sure he forgot that he had Bivouac in the stable and won a Newmarket, but I'd happily back Bivouac to beat Home of the Brave down the straight. But that was sort of, I suppose, quite the leg up on what the stable sort of thought of the horse as well. And you had that form, his straight form, to sort of back up what James Cummings was saying. And as I said, they ran first and second. It's obviously easy to say after the race now, but I think it's just important to really zero in on that straight form when you are looking at straight races. And I suppose that's particularly important given over the next few months we're going to have a fair few Flemington meetings, and there's obviously going to be sort of 2 or 3 straight races each day there. So it's something to definitely keep in mind.
Excellent. Good advice there, Balls. Hope he's not tipping us off that Bivouac's going to go missing. I'm surprised they didn't send him to start and he's going around again. So maybe Cummings forgot that as well. I'm going to talk about betting early, because this is something that's really done my head in in recent times. It's getting harder and harder to bet early. And when I say bet early, whether that's if you can get on when the prices first go up, or whether you have to wait for the minimum bet limits to come through in the morning of the race. But the percentages of the bookies have gone higher and higher in recent times with all the fees and the buffer they like to give themselves to not get knocked off as much as they used to. But it's very hard betting in these high percentage markets unless you're really confident that you're taking a great price. Obviously, as the percentage of the market drops leading up to race time, in theory, all the horses should be drifting in the market. So if you bet early, you might miss out on that better price later on. So if you're trying to weigh up whether to back a horse or not, I would suggest looking at the other horses in the market and trying to work out what you think they are going to do price-wise. Often if the main chances can be hard to back, or they're from a struggling stable or an unfashionable jockey, you'd be surprised how far they can actually drift in the market, and the horse that you want to back, it might be the only one anyone wants to back. So even if you're betting into 135, 140%, it still might be the right time to bet in the morning if you can't see another horse that the market can really come for. Obviously, if there's a few horses in the market with a bit going for them that tick a few boxes, you might be best to wait until closer to the race. But if you're trying to work out when to go and when to hold off, just have a look at the other horses in the market and try and work out if there's going to be any support for them. That would be my advice. I should have taken my advice on Sunday, actually, so that's one for next time for me. Okay, Balls, we are looking ahead now. I think the spring's finally here. We've got the PB Lawrence Stakes on Saturday at Caulfield.
Yeah, it's looking like a very good meeting. I've had a quick peek ahead at the weather as well, just see what it's like. The Caulfield track, or as of when I last looked on Racing Australia, was a soft 6. Now, there's bits and pieces of rain each day, including on Saturday, so I'm not sure if the track's going to improve too much, if it does at all. So I wouldn't have thought it'd get to sort of near heavy, but it's probably just going to be in that soft range, I'd assume. But yeah, as you mentioned, the PB Lawrence, it's generally, I suppose the last couple of years, it hasn't seemed to be the strongest race you'd ever see. Obviously, it's fairly early in the spring, so a lot of horses are held back, say the Memsey, in a couple of weeks' time. But it's actually going to be a fairly good race on Saturday with Mystic Journey, Regal Power and Arcadia Queen all resuming. Those couple of Perth horses coming over sort of add a bit of interest. And as always, the champion Tassie Mare, who won the race last year, will create plenty of interest in the race. And there's also the Vane Stakes and the Corsette for the 3-year-olds as well. So there'll be plenty of first uppers in there. So obviously it's a bit of a tough time of the year knowing how much horses have improved from 2 to 3. Obviously, you've got the jump outs there to look at, but they obviously don't tell the full story. So it'd be interesting to see how those sort of decent 2-year-olds, now 3, have come back.
Yeah, tricky time, but really exciting time too, isn't it? We start to see these quality animals kicking off, and the sort of the start of where they can possibly get to through the end of the spring. We're obviously hoping for not too much rain with Mystic Journey. I think everyone's pretty on board now that definitely her trainer Adam Trinder doesn't want it too wet, so let's hope that we get to the better side of soft there, and hopefully she can repeat the dose of her win last year. Thanks again for you, Balls. Another show done and dusted. Anything else that you spotted in the noms by any chance?
No, there wasn't really. I actually haven't had a good look through them this week. But after tipping great again and not getting the chocolates last week, we might have the week off.
Well, you weren't far away. Anyone who can find a winner off the knobs is too good for me. There's no point looking until Wednesday as far as I'm concerned. But thank you once again for all your hard work, Balls, and thank you to everyone who has watched once again, everyone who gives us support on Twitter. Thank you very much. Give us a like and a subscribe if you like the show there on YouTube, and we will be back next week, hopefully reviewing a Mystic Journey win in the PB Lawrence Stakes. Thank you, Balls. We'll see you next week.
See yous.